Hello everyone, so welcome back to the latest session. So let's jump right in. We've been looking at comparing Indian and Chinese growth stories, then we looked at the levels of pollution, and I think in that context we looked at PM 2.5 and PM 10, right? Particulate matter of the size 2.5 micrometers or less, particulate matter of the size 10 micrometers or less. We looked at general sources here and so on and so forth. And we also discussed that, or I believe briefly touched upon the aspect that PM 2.5 is remarkably dangerous to us, right? Why is that? Because it can enter our circulatory system, right, or it can enter the blood through the lungs, right, and that has shown to affect the cardiovascular system and cause or lead to cysts in the brain, let's say, and so on and so forth. So we looked at that briefly, and then we saw that India is remarkably affected by air pollution, and the statistic I think we looked at was that 8 of the top 10 most polluted cities on the earth are from India, and I guess Delhi tops the list. PM 10 here we have the data from 2010 to 2016, and again from the Guardian. Again, keep in mind that the Guardian doesn't obviously measure this data. It's more or less a collation of the data published in various research articles. So, for example, if you go to this particular article that I reference out here, I'm talking about the Guardian here, you will be able to find the links to those research articles. What they do a good job of is, I guess, taking a holistic picture of the data that's been coming out recently and present it in a way that that is easily understandable to the layman. At the end of the day, you don't want to bombard the layman with what do we say, complex data, right, or mountains or heaps of data and leave the guy confused, right. You want to change his perception or make him more aware by presenting the data in a way that he can understand and relate to. So, I guess that's the reason I am taking the data from this particular newspaper. Again, as I mentioned that I trust this newspaper or have grown to trust this newspaper. So, we will not go into that again. But if you want to look at the research articles, obviously you can go into this particular what do we say, Google search, find this particular article, and you will be able to find the relevant research articles that present this data. So, we see that Delhi is remarkably polluted, I guess, right, and again PM 10 and PM 2.5, and if you look at the number of deaths due to air pollution, we are not able to correlate them, or not correlate, pardon me, collate them well in India, but we do have enough statistics, or data, we will look at that. And the major aspect here is that more than 90% of air pollution related deaths occur in low and middle income countries, right. As you can see here, low and middle income and high income countries. South and Southeast Asia disproportionately affected, if I can say so. So, how many million people, I guess? So, we have 2.5 million deaths, right, 2.5 million deaths due to air pollution, right, and Pacific, Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, obviously relatively less in Europe and in America, but again relatively less deaths in the high income countries. I guess that's a feature all across, or in this set of data. So, again, as we see, the poor are typically bearing the brunt, and again, as we briefly discussed, why are we not able to get these cleaner technologies, let us say, right. Again, it is an issue with respect to capital investment, right, and maybe maintenance cost, but I won't be sure about that, and access to the technologies in the first case. So, here we are not talking about carbon dioxide or such in general, we are talking about NOx, ozone at the ground level, we are talking about particulate matter and so on and so forth. These aspects can be, what do we say, looked at, or the concentration of these pollutants, let us say the PM 2.5, PM 10, NOx, when I say NOx, I am talking about NO and NO2, and then VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and ozone, which is formed during the reaction with sunlight or in the presence of sunlight, and NOx and VOC, we will look at that later. Ozone formed at the ground level. We know that ozone is a remarkably oxidizing agent, right, and PM 2.5 or PM 10, so on and so forth. These aspects, they can be regulated or controlled relatively easily, but again you need to have regulation. But again, India, we have a lot of laws, but not what do we say, standardized enforcement, if I may say so. So, enforcement, and then obviously the access to cleaner technologies. And where do we get the cleaner technologies from? I guess people who have been researching them since quite some time. Research is something else, but making that practically feasible and what do we say, implementable is something else, right? So to get access to that technologies, that's an issue. So again, we see that most of the poor bear the brunt of this air pollution now. And again, where are most of these deaths? In the poorer countries or developing countries, I guess, South and Southeast Asia, right? So let's move on here. So one aspect we were looking at was, that greenhouse gas emissions, let's say, most of it was due to energy, let's say, right? And here what do we see? We see the average annual growth for a decade between 2007 and 17, and we see that oil considerable fraction, natural gas, yes, I guess the major fraction, coal, and very little or little nuclear, hydro, and renewables, let's say, right? It would have been worthwhile if I could get the data from 1997 to 2007, because I believe that's when this particular what do we say, energy generation from renewable sources really took off. But again, that's a different story. But if we compare that with 2018, what do you see there? You see that though oil, I guess, yes, is more or less stagnant. You see natural gas, remarkable increase, right? And coal also considerable increase, if I may say so, and then renewables too. Though there is a shift towards, I guess, relatively more cleaner, what do we say, sources of energy, you see that, in the first case, the energy usage or requirement for energy, pardon me, is increasing. And though the fraction of what do we say, energy generated from relatively cleaner technologies is increasing, there is still, or considerable what do we say, energy being generated from those sources that lead to either greenhouse gas emissions or lead to different release of different kinds of pollutants. So that's something to keep in mind, though, right? And let's look at who is at the forefront of this push for renewables. In India, yes, people are pushing for it, but again, everything comes down to cost. Only now, I guess, I think it's now July 2020, right? Not think, it is July 2020, and now I think it's break even. But I think below that particular price, I think it's 5 or so, what do we say, rupees per unit, let's say, right? And below that, I believe the discoms can't work, right? Pardon me, not discoms, these solar power companies, let's say, I think can't get their price below that, or I think it's 4.5 rupees. So I think they are at break even now, so we need to see what the future holds out, let's say. But increasingly, due to various issues, coal is also, or power derived from coal is also getting to be costlier, and that can obviously also really, push the what can I say, or be the trigger for us shifting to renewable sources of energy. Again, here we see the trend, here you see that, or what do we see? We are talking about Britain. And why Britain? Obviously, because the Guardian is based in Britain, and obviously they will have more data about it. And obviously, this is reflective of what's happening all across the European Union. So that's the reason we are presenting this. Again, we are talking about developed countries here, but what's it now? In 2012, it's more or less coal, right? As you can see, daily share of Britain's power generated by burning coal. Most of it was by coal now, right? But what's happening, with time, though, as you can see, that's starting to decrease, right? And in 2019, I guess, you see significant sections or significant number of days when almost all the energy that was generated by Britain for its citizens, let's say, or used by citizens of Britain was only from, or not only from, or mostly from renewable, and certainly not from coal. So I guess you do see a shift, and why? I guess again regulations play a part, and again only when they are enforced well enough. But more or less the push came from European Union, right? And obviously now UK is not a part of European Union, but hopefully they will what do we say, continue to decrease their dependence on coal, right? So what do we see out here? We see that in general, again we are talking about the period 2000 to 2018, we see the shift here, right? Increasing, what do we say, renewables and so on and so forth. There are still some Eastern European countries, right, where you have greater dependence upon coal? Well, I guess as their economies become relatively more resilient, or hopefully once they become more resilient and have access to these cleaner technologies, they are also going to phase out coal and try to what do we say, look at renewable sources of energy, right. So that's one thing, but you do see that see this trend. And if you remember, when we looked at the data with respect to energy, I believe from 1990 to 2016 or so, you saw that European Union, I guess the trend was something like this, and it started decreasing now, right. This is with respect to greenhouse gases. And why is that? You see this, or due to regulations, right, a conscious decision was made or taken rather, and that is what you see out here, right. So that is something to keep in mind, but again I would have loved to get data for India and China, but I could not get reliable data. So I could not present this data, but let me see if I can find the data for our dependence upon coal. I do know it is decreasing, but our total energy demand is so high that the absolute values of the energy derived from coal are still increasing, I guess. So that is something to keep in mind. So again, heavily coal dependent economies in Central and Eastern Europe, I guess, have been slow to phase out dirty fuel. Again, why? It is all about economics, I guess, right, costlier, I guess, right, you have to phase it out. And Germany, I guess, one of the most developed countries, it's also delaying shutting down its coal plants. Why? Most of it is they are considerably dependent upon coal, and I guess even for a developed country you are going to have, what do we say, have to deal with local compulsions or domestic compulsions, and that is one of the reasons, I guess, why they are not going to be delayed in meeting their goal of cutting 40% greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. Again, this is something I would try to refer to. The type of government that is holding power, let us say. Right now in 2020 anyway, we have a wave of populist what do we say, governments all across the world, Brazil, USA, Britain, and so on and so forth, and other countries too, I guess, right. So here, I guess, typically what I have seen is that with these kinds of governments, they typically rarely rely on what do we say, scientific data, but are more prone to, what do we say, what can I say, giving in to populist demands that typically can lead to short term, what do we say, benefits, but in the long term really would knock the tree down, let us say, literally knock the tree down. So we will come back to that. Again, prevailing types of government, right, policies have been changing considerably. As I mentioned, even in USA now, they have what do we say, allowed increasing levels of energy from coal, and I guess shale gas too, right, and such. Again, most of it is due to populist government. So we need to see where we will end up in, let us say, a 5-year time period, let us say, if this wave of populist governments is going to be temporary, or if we have to pay the price for it, right. Again, let me not go too far, but again keep in mind that you have governments and people who prop them up playing a critical role here, right. So it is not just about, what do we say, access to cleaner technologies, it is the people themselves too, and lack of awareness, if I may say so, right. And in this context, I would like to bring about one aspect, with respect to Europe, and why I guess there has been a greater push there. One aspect is awareness, right, and obviously regulation, yes, both are interlinked. And other aspect is they have been bearing the brunt of heat waves now, and obviously that leads to, what do we say, greater awareness too. And I believe 2019 June was the hottest on record ever in Europe, and mostly in other places including India too. So let us just look at the data here. So when we say hot, I guess it is unbearably hot, and in general global warming we are also talking about a decrease in the number of pleasant days. Let us say Roorkee now, we have very pleasant temperature in January and March and maybe April, and September, October, and some days of November. What has been happening, I guess, or what would happen rather, is that the number of pleasant days is decreasing. For example, you see me sweating miserably here, right, and that is because I came what do we say, from outside where the temperature was pretty, what do we say, inhospitable, if I may say so, right. again the number of such days when the temperature is inhospitable is increasing, while the number of those days that we find the temperature or the conditions to be pleasant is decreasing. Again global warming. So, here what do I have here? 2019 June month was the hottest June on record. Again here you have the reference. Combined global land surface air and sea surface water temperature deviations from 1950 to 1980. And what do you see here? Obviously, if I may say, is it exponential? I guess we can call it exponential increase. And keep in mind that here we are looking at what 1.2 degrees or so, I guess, right, and that is a remarkable increase now, right. And the changes or effects are going to be catastrophic when we reach, I guess, around 2 degrees centigrade, and that is the value to which what do we say these different countries, let us say, are trying to limit the temperature increase, right. So, but I do not think we will be able to meet that, we will come back to that later now, right. So, here this is the hottest on record, keep that in mind, hottest on record. So, here let us say we are going to just look at some graphics here, right. Here we have let us say number of days per year that could feel 100 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter, let us see, right. 100 degrees Fahrenheit, how much will that be? Maybe some 35, I guess. 5 by 9 into f minus 32, you can do that. So, 0 days, right. So, pleasant temperature all around here. Keep in mind that this is between 1970 to 2000. Here we have it for USA, right. 1 to 30 days. So, just a month when it is unbearable or relatively not bearable, let us say. And in the southern parts, I guess you have relatively warmer temperatures here. So, now the prediction here, let us see, if the current levels hold up 2036 to 2065, right, this particular 3-year period, you see now the number of regions where, at least again keep in mind this is in USA in the northern hemisphere, let us say, right, you have the number of regions that experience good, what do we say, or more number of days with hospitable climate is now decreasing or remarkably less, let us say, right. And considerable sections now have remarkably inhospitable, what do we say, or more number of days when the climate is inhospitable, right. Again keep in mind migration since time immemorial has been dependent upon what now, food, search for food, security, water, which are related, and mostly that has been driven by temperature, let us say, right. And again we do not need to go into this, but again most of the what do we say invasions are such, let us say, have been for access to fertile land, right, and again climate too. So, keep in mind that this particular what do we say global warming is already driving migration from South America to North America, that is one other push too. We will keep that in mind, we will come back to that later. So, again as you can see here 1970 to 2000 and 2036 to 2065, we are not too far from here, right. Obviously, this is the metric and I would have loved to see the modeling for India, but again I did not have it, but I wanted to show you the trend here, right. So, it is not as if there are some countries out there that are going to what do we say entirely miss the adverse effects due to global warming now. Every country is going to be affected because we are all tied to each other, or our futures are tied to each other, and that is something that you guys, the future citizens, have to keep in mind, right. So, let us move on. As again as I said, let us say the number of days when the climate is going to be inhospitable is increasing big time now, right. So, that is just within a few decades now, right. Again let us see if we will be able to make things better. And here one particular statistic that, not statistic, a picture that really hit me was that here Doggerland was thought to be densely populated by Stone Age standards, but was submerged 7,500 years ago. So, here we have continental Europe above sea level, so 16,000 BC, right, and then I guess 8,000 BC and then 7,000 BC and what it is now, right. You see that it is a phenomenon that has been occurring, but we are now going to accelerate this remarkably now, right. And why is that? Remarkable levels of greenhouse gas emissions, and we are really heating up the what do we say atmosphere than it would have naturally occurred, let us say, right. So, that is something that is going to that you are going to look at the extent of what do we say submergence. something that's taken a few thousands of years, I guess we are going to witness it within a few hundreds of years now. So that let's see what the future is going to hold for us. And temperatures in many northern hemispheres cities will in 2050 anyway will resemble those places closer to the equator in 2019. For example, here we have Delhi, let's say. It's going to look like Kanpur now, and the increase in the temperature of the warmest month is going to be by 3.5 degrees centigrade. And see, you see a number of countries here, not countries, pardon me, cities from Europe, North America, again UK, Russia, and so on and so forth. You see that everyone's affected, and certainly we are going to be affected too. That's something that I wanted to emphasize, I guess. It's not just we who are going to be affected, but other people too. But I heard or looked at news reports where people have been talking about them facing cold weather, and now them having or them going to have warm weather or pleasant weather, let's say. Well, that's one line of thinking, right? Well, when you have more than half of the human population suffering, you being impervious, let's say, or indifferent to their suffering is, I guess, human nature. But it will catch up with these people who think that they are safe for now, I guess, right? So that's something I wanted to share with you. Some of the people from the relatively colder countries and developed countries were asking why they need to care about global warming when now they have more pleasant or warmer climates, when earlier they were facing colder, days, I guess, right? Again, that's something to think about. So here, global wave and temperature increase by 2050. You see that a clutch of cities are going to be remarkably affected. Remarkable 8 degrees centigrade increase is going to be inhospitable by any standards, let's say, right? So we are not far off from this, and I thought I had it for India too. So here we see that by 2050, 104 cities are forecast to experience climatic conditions that have not yet been seen in a major city. So even in India, let's say, all these countries, not countries, pardon me, all these major cities, let's say, are going to witness temperatures or witness temperatures, let's say, that they have never ever come across. Now think about the people without air conditioning now, right? I mean, that's going to be remarkably tough on them. People, we have seen people dropping dead when coming back from what do we see now? These mega cities, let's say, or metropolitan cities, when they were trying to walk back to their homes, let's say, right? Well, I guess it's been in news if you are aware. So this might not hurt you or me directly now, but over time things add up. The world works in mysterious ways, but one thing that always strikes me is that adverse effects somewhere else are not going to be contained only to that area. They are going to be area or set of people, but there is always going to be a spillover, and it's going to affect the people in that neighborhood or society too. So again, it's going to get remarkably tough, again, unless we take the relevant action. Let's see what can happen or what will happen, I guess. So we are talking about 2050 here. So let me, again, rainfall will be a particular problem for such cities with extreme flooding or extreme climatic events relatively more frequent now, right? I think now it's one extreme event per day in the world. Earlier it was one extreme event for 15 days or so. So now we are talking about thundering typhoons, I guess, right, and flooding and so on and so forth, being more frequent now, right. So that's something to keep in mind. So here, I guess, okay, I already have the data here. Increase in number of extreme events, currently one per week. I guess I said one per day. So here, what do we have? Aftermath of the damage left by Cyclone Kenneth in a village north of Mozambique, let's say, or in Mozambique, pardon me. Right, this is the destruction that's going to be wreaked, and we saw, I mean, a few months ago, the destruction in West Bengal, and prior to that, I guess, in Orissa too, right, and the Bombay had a near scare. So these, what do we say, catastrophic events are going to increase in frequency. So again, it's a tinderbox now, the world, and it's getting worse now. So that's something to keep in mind. So increasing concern in developed countries. So I wanted to see, let's say, or get data rather, where you understand or try to look at what the people are thinking in the developed countries. Why is it important? I guess, they will drive the policies of the government in those countries, and typically the developed countries have a considerable say in what direction the world is going to travel in. A remarkable direction, remarkable impact, if I may say so, right? So let's see what we have. We have June 2019, and let's say a few months before October 2018, let's see. Obviously, health, poverty, and I guess in India this is going to be remarkably high, and education too. But you see that, environment, which already was what do we say, a concern for quite a significant fraction of the people, witnessed a significant jump. Again, as I mentioned, that was probably influenced by the hottest ever what do we say, June on record, and the remarkable heat wave that lasted for I think a month or so. But again, keep in mind that the number of people who are concerned by the environment is increasing now. So that's something to keep in mind. And obviously housing, terrorism, crime, trade, jobs, and immigration. I guess for us, I'm not sure, but I think it will be somewhere out here. And health and poverty and education are going to be at the top, and I guess by great margins, I guess. But we need to create awareness, and that's I guess what we are trying to do now, right? Once you go out into the world, become engineers, or take up whichever career path you think is going to be fulfilling to you. The hope is that being a person who is relatively more acutely aware of the adverse effects, especially on the long term, that you will be able to influence decision making at different levels, either being a bureaucrat or being a technocrat or being an entrepreneur, let's say, right? But you will be able to in your own way influence decision making. So that's the hope here. Again, let's hope that the day that more people care about the environment and our own sustenance or livelihood is not way too far off, right? So let's move on. So in this context, I wanted to just discuss one example closer to home. So I live here, right, just on campus, and on campus, all the leaves, I think we get, 2 tons per day or 2 tons per month maybe, I am not sure, it could be per month. 2 tons of leaves are collected per month. So earlier or even now, we have a vendor who collects the leaves and he used to dispose them. Keep in mind, it's dispose. So the contractor is paid to remove the leaves, but not to, what do we say, use them for any particular purpose. I heard, but again this could be rumor mongering, that the guy was just burning the leaves on the divider on the national highway. That's what he does. But again, keep in mind that these are rumors now. But recently, I guess the institute has now what do we say, brought a shredder, or purchased, not brought, bought a shredder, and has been shredding these leaves and then what do we say, giving it to the paper and pulp industries, let's see, right? So what else is going on, I'm not relatively clear, but we will try to visit that once you are on campus and once this corona induced what do we say, effects are away from us, hopefully, right? We will try to look at that. But again, keep in mind that the paper and pulp industries are paying the institute to get the leaves, what do we say, or to get the leaves, I guess, right? So that's one thing. So what do people do here now? Here, let's say I can throw the leaves from the gardens in the dustbin, and they are going to be collected and shredded centrally and sent to the paper and pulp industry. But what is the person who is what about the person who is right opposite me but it's not part of the campus? Now what do? They burn. And when you burn again leaves, you see that it's remarkably poor oxidation, let's say, right? So remarkable levels of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide are given out, remarkably high. I guess I have the data, we will come back to that. So one fine day, rather than just bitching or nagging to myself about the people and their what do we say, habits, I went and talked to the people. Please note that my Hindi is remarkably poor now. So well, the person was amenable to what do we say, listen or change. But then the pertinent question is, he asked me, okay, you tell me, what can I do? I can't keep piling up the leaves here, right? And I don't want to cut down the tree too. And you tell me what to do. So again, the situation is that people would change or would like to change if given the tools or the means or the opportunities to change now, right? So here what's happening now, you are burning a lot of stuff, and especially in the winter months, all this is going to be suspended near the ground level, and we are going to bear the after effects. But again, why is that now? Because you don't have the people don't have the means, let's say, to dispose the waste in a scientific manner, or at least dispose them in any manner rather, right? So in this context, the example I want to give was that, the security guard out there in the cold months, he has to burn, what do we say, leaves or such, because he doesn't have a radiator now in the place that he is patrolling. So to get some warmth, the person at least outside the campus, let's say, when he is patrolling, and again keep in mind Roorkee, it gets remarkably cold, let's say, I think 2 degrees, 5 degrees centigrade or so. And when you are alone and sitting out there, it gets remarkably cold. And he is burning this, the leaves to get some warmth now. And I, sitting inside a air-conditioned room, might be bitching or nagging about that, but without an alternative, he has to survive. What can he do? He has to survive. And let's just, why do I refer to myself and the security guard? Because I guess it's different levels of or types of livelihood. Let's say, I have to fly, if not a lot, quite a few times a year, maybe 5 times or so a year. Well, by some standards that's a lot, by some it's not. Why I bring that out is that, let's look at this particular data here. When a person travels from London to Rome, let's say, one flight, they emit 234 kgs of carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide is more than the average that citizen emits less, average citizen emits less carbon dioxide in a year in all these countries together again, right, all these countries. So the average citizen there in these countries emits less, carbon dioxide in an entire year due to his activities than a person taking one flight to, from London to Rome now. So think of who is maybe polluting the earth more. I, who will travel from, let's say, Delhi to my home place, or Delhi to London, let's say, to attend a conference or such, right? Who will pollute more, me or the security guard who burns, some leaves, which will have certain local effect because you are going to have carbon monoxide, particulate matter and such, or a person who travels more, and uses the flights more, I guess, right? Okay, I guess I am out of my out of time today. We are done with half an hour session. So I'll continue this in the next session, I guess. Thank you.